I guess just tell us a little bit about what struck you from his early life.
He was raised in relative comfort. He's born in 1930, which makes him 95 today. And that's the absolute height or depth of the depression. And his dad had some college, but was not a white collar. He was sort of soft white collar. We might think of him sort of a middle executive, at a brokerage firm. That job obviously went out the window. The family was a bit transient, but by the late 30s, when Clint was around middle school age, or just about middle school age, they settled in Piedmont and they were comfortable. During the 40s, when Clint was in middle and high school, the family had a home with a in-ground swimming pool. They had a vacation property. His mom had a job as well, but it was sort of like, because her kids were in school and she was sort of a go-getter. That was her nature, and it wasn't like they were trying to put food on the table by having her work. So he was raised in comfort, but because the family moved around a lot when he was a boy, younger boy, he was a loner. He was always the tallest kid. He was always the new kid. And temperamentally, he's taciturn and quiet and internal. That's just who he is. Like the Dirty Harry and Man with No Name were really, sort of tailor made for him because that's who he was. He was always cutting dialogue from his characters, in the scripts because he felt like he could do more with silence because that's how he'd lived. So he learned to rely on himself, and he found two outlets that run through his entire life. One was he loved being in nature. One of his grandmothers owned a farm east of San Francisco Bay. He spent a lot of time there, roaming the hills, tending to animals, doing, physical work around a farm. And the other was music. His mom played the piano a little, and she taught him boogie woogie piano, and he learned to play jazz piano, and that's been a through line his whole life. You see it in his film scores and his involvement with the Monterey Jazz Festival. His first movie as a director, Play Misty for Me, he is a jazz disc jockey. What a strange choice. And yet, that's like very, very close to his heart to this day. When you see a Clint Eastwood movie, you will hear jazz inflected scores, and jazz musicians absolutely credit him as one of the most knowledgeable filmmakers. So those strains go through his life and they come right out of his childhood.
Yeah, and it didn't I mean, he certainly wasn't one of those kids who was like, "I'm gonna be an actor," and, and follow that path. It kind of not fell into it, but it was like something that like, "All right, I'll try this now," and, was at a studio acting school and was trying it, but wasn't getting great marks there or whatever, however they were graded. But, nobody at that thing was like, "This is our star," he kind of happened into it, which is kind of remarkable in the sense of like, unless I think for a lot of people, unless you're like, this is what I want to do, and then you have setbacks and this, and then I'm going to keep going and keep going. If it's not something that you've wanted to do since you were 5 years old, then maybe if it's not going great at first, you might be like, all right, what's the next thing? But he just like, he was a hard worker and then, but just stayed consistent and just stuck with it, which
Yeah,
seems to be another thing. Yeah.
I believe he was close at some points to giving it up. After he went to Universal Talent School for like 2 years. They let him go. He had a bunch of crappy roles in forgotten movies and one-off episodes of TV shows that are forgotten. Um, and he stands out a little bit, when you see him like in Francis in the Navy about a mule who can talk. He's one of the gaggle of sailors, and he's the tallest and sort of most conventionally good looking in, sort of classic, He-Man leading man looks, but he doesn't stand out for his acting ability. And he was doing manual labor on the side. He was digging swimming pools, among other things, with a shovel, and then he got a part on a TV series, the second lead, and it ran for 7 years. If he doesn't get that part on Rawhide, I don't believe we're talking today.
Yeah, I mean, that's that what a I mean, sevens. I mean, I guess, Westerns, especially in that era, TV shows, like they were running them for a long time, but it's still incredibly fortunate. Like any TV show to run for multiple seasons is amazing, and can make a career, certainly. Um, and then when he was, that's when Or I don't know if you have anything more to say about Rawhide. I mean, I know there was for those of us like who only started to experience Clint as a movie star. It's almost when I first found out he was in. Oh, like he was a regular on a TV show. Like what? I had no idea. It doesn't seem very Clint.
Yeah, and it was basically his acting and directing school. Like, he could try things, there were whole episodes built around his character, Rowdy Yates, and he was in 217 episodes, and he wasn't in every minute of every episode, but it was an hour-long series. And if you take all the movies he appeared in, including the ones before Rawhide, where he has just one scene, he was in more hours of Rawhide than he has been on screen combined, which is crazy to think about. It's almost like two separate careers. But he also learned in 217 episodes over 7 years, 6.5 years, he probably worked with 25 directors. And there's a lot of standing around, a lot of times where he wasn't in the scene and he would pay attention. He took it as, this is my chance to learn a profession. He said again and again when he was a young actor, Hollywood may be done with me someday. And I want to have something I can fall back on. And I'm getting this free education in how movies are made. And I'm going to take advantage of that. His dad was a big influence on his work ethic. He saw his dad struggle through the depression with his chin up and, never feeling sorry for himself and saying, make yourself indispensable, then ask for what you want, show them what you can do, then reach for the stars. And that was, when Clint made Play Misty for Me, he took the minimum payment that an actor or director could be paid just to show the studio, I'm serious about this. The opportunity means more to me than the money. And ironically, for Mystic River and Million Dollar Baby, back to back amazing hit movies, he had to do the same thing. He took Directors Guild and Screen Actors Guild minimum for both of those pictures.
That's wild, and obviously, like at that point, certainly, like he didn't need the money, but it's still kind of like doesn't mean you don't want to get what your value is. But yeah, obviously, his influence was like, let's get these made. So then, off of Rawhide, then we had sort of the Sergio Leone trilogy, The Man with No Name, which was then, they're very divisive in a lot of ways in terms of, are they good movies, are they bad movies? Certainly back then I think a lot of people were like, what is this, and then now I think they're considered more, classics. But what an interesting path also to become a movie star, but not in Hollywood, not in America.
Right. James Garner and Steve McQueen had also been on TV Westerns and became movie stars, but they did it in Hollywood. Clint did something there was no formula for this. We see it in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, where the Rick Dalton character goes to make Westerns in Italy. But Clint was the first, literally. He got 15 grand, period. No percentage, nothing else, to appear in what became Fistful of Dollars. And he was the only English speaker on the set. He kept cutting his dialogue. When he showed up, they were so ill-informed. Sergio Leone had a vision, but he didn't have the particulars. So he had people wearing like coonskin caps in Mexico, and things like that. But he also didn't follow the Hollywood rule. Like, you couldn't show someone shoot and the fellow being shot in the same frame. So the violence and the close-ups and the music and the use of colors and the grotesque faces, all of that was radically new. But Clint didn't know, because he made the movie, he went home, and it didn't play in the States for 3 years because they had stolen the plot from the Japanese film Yojimbo, and if they had played in certain markets, they would have been sued. So Clint was a huge international movie star, particularly in Europe and South America, before anyone in Hollywood saw those films.